Khrys, welcome to the Kriegsspiel umpiring chat.
Good to be here.
Tell me where you sit in the world. We don't want to, people are always careful about their personal information, but just where in the world do you sit?
I'm actually on the map for the IKS. Hey, if you're in the area, you should ask me to play some Kriegsspiel.
There
But
you
I'm in
go.
Sydney, Australia at the moment for the next 3 months. We're still packing up for the move.
Brilliant. Sydney, Australia. I've yet to get there myself. Someday I will come down there just simply to play Kriegsspiel. My
Brilliant.
wife
Well, I've
wants to
got,
go, my wife wants to go see all the, countryside and go visit, but I'm saying, no, I'm going to go there to play Kriegsspiel.
well, if it helps. Right now we're in Sydney, but we're moving up to the Hunter, so there'll be all those wineries to tour.
There you go. Fantastic stuff. Well, tell you, so talk about how you got your start in Kriegspiel and just give us a little bit of information on how you landed here.
Basically, this is going to be a long story, but basically my
Yeah.
parents thought it'd be a very clever idea because they didn't want their kids playing with guns. So they didn't let me play with guns. So instead of wanting to be a soldier, I wanted to be a general. So I got into reading history, got into reading military history. Um, all my grandparents of both genders served in the war.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of stories there. I ended up doing I guess Kriegsspiel adjacent, sort of mental games of talking about where I'd land forces and how I'd move forces along when I was quite young.
Yep.
I ran my first very basic Kriegsspiel when I was 6,
Wow.
and I haven't really stopped. So I've been getting increasingly serious about it since then for the last 30 odd years. Um,
I think that'd be
did
hilarious right now if we went on like an hour and a half exploration of the Kriegspiel that you did when you were 6. But we'll,
Yeah,
we'll,
well, I mean,
we'll not do
it
that.
also my grandfather, who was a serving naval officer during the war, also like taught me through talking about naval landings and amphibious stuff and landing troops on the beaches of Sydney, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's educational and interesting at the same time.
Brilliant. And then when did you discover the IKS and kind of this crazy group that we're a part of?
Okay, so when I was in England, actually before I moved to England, so when I was in 2009, 2008, I was playing with the online with the Little Garrison group, which is
Okay.
one of the two founder groups of the IKS. And among others, I got to know this person called Father General, who was American, and we occasionally played stuff online together. Then moved to the UK for a couple of years and met them and played with them in person. And some years after I moved back from the UK, I was talking with them, and Father General, who we now know as Marshall, dropped in to see if there was anyone around who was interested in playing with or helping umpire for this Grand Gettysburg thing, for this new organization, the
Okay.
IKS,
So
that he was
there's a
trying
little
to found.
tidbit, there's a little historical tidbit that Marshall used to call himself Father General.
Yep.
Oh, that's precious. That's wonderful. Okay, good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Also ran games and played games on other servers and other websites beforehand.
Okay.
Actually, I bet Tac Covert and I have been playing against each other or on the same side of each other since 2013. Oh, 2009 actually. We played Shiloh back then. So
Okay.
it's been a while.
Do you know, here's a little historical tidbit. You were the very first CIC, you were the CIC of the very first play-by-post Kriegsspiel I did.
Really?
Yeah, we were doing that BattleTech game.
Yes, yes, I remember. I remember.
Yeah. And it kind of petered out. I don't know, the umpire disappeared, but yeah, you were the commander. We were kind of defending those hills for
Yeah.
what turned out to be like a 5 month Kriegspiel. So
I mean,
anyway,
the umpire is back. He's actually my co-umpire in the Esprit de Corps campaign I'm running at the moment,
oh great,
or
okay,
the
good.
pre-battle
Yes,
thing.
that was
Yeah,
yeah. So you were one of the first people I met in the society. That's great. So talk about
you escaped my net. We didn't play together long enough for me to take notes on your playstyle.
yeah. There you go. Well, I'm like the wind. I just off I go. So what? Talk about you've got quite a few projects going on, but talk about what periods are interesting to you because you've got quite a few that you
I'd
play.
say the area I know the least about and have the least interest in is post World War II. I'm
Okay.
learning about that, but I'm not as interested in that, which does sometimes it can be a bar with professional wargaming side of things. Although, Whisper is very engaging, and I'm becoming more interested in some of that. But generally, I'm interested in World War II, back through Black Powder to Sword and Board, back to Ancients.
Right. Okay. So, uh, what's your favorite of the ones that you know about? What do you tend as your default?
To
Or are you
run,
more, say again?
to play,
Yeah,
to
to run.
watch.
So when you umpire, you say which ones do you kind of muse about? Which period?
I I have active projects in most of those periods.
Okay. So you're
I
okay. Got
have
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to go in phases. So like because I knew that I was going to when I start the Grand Ricewitz project, that's probably going to occupy me for a good 2 to 4 years. So that's why I'm running the Invasion of Malta now, because I'm not going to do it while I'm doing that, and if I don't, someone else will, and I'll get irritable because I spent over a decade getting everything together for that, including going to Malta and going to the National Archives in England to get the pay records, to get the orders of battle, to get the maps of things. And so I wanted to make sure I ran that before I got occupied in my my Napoleonic monstrosity, and not afterwards.
So wait, hold on a second. We have to dive into that because that's pretty impressive. So you went to Malta in preparation for a game, or just as
Yep.
part, and then you went to the
I
UK to get pay
I
records?
could not get the records that I needed for it. I could not find them online. So when we were living in the UK for a couple of years, I declared that my birthday weekend was going to be we were going to Malta. And we spent a while on the Lascaris war rooms. We spent a while picking over some of the terrain. Carter's actually been there too. So when we were putting together this game, we were talking about different areas we'd seen and walked in person. And it became a bit of a running joke that every time we run an OKS game, it's going to be somewhere that one or more of the umpires have walked the ground.
I love that. I love that. I walked P Ridge, and I'm going to put together a P Ridge game, a live one
You should.
for some friends. There's actually nothing as thrilling as walking the ground and then running a game on it.
Yeah,
So I think
definitely.
that's brilliant.
National Archives. Actually, even I found managed to find some German sources. I speak a bit of German from my school days, and I've honed it. I lived in Germany for a bit, and when we were also in Europe that time, when we were in Bonn, I raided the military archives there.
Amazing. And I mean, how accessible was that? Because I myself would love to go do that.
Reasonably, I got a reference, but I got the impression you could just ask as long as you're patient.
Yeah, right. Okay, great. And so talk about the Ricewitz project, because that sounds like anyone who talks about a multi-year project turns all of our heads. So what's going on with that?
Well, this actually goes back to, do you remember the Red vs. Blue campaign, the
Yeah.
original one, or was that
Yeah.
before? Yeah, cool. The original October War, which I was in the planning team for that, the umpire team for that. The concept was, well, we noticed that, as you may have noticed, in a lot of the Kriegsspiel games, people don't tend to play it as part of a larger context. They tend to play, they've got their troops on the field, they're going to do their thing on the field, and they're just going to fight it out. And you end up with quite absurd casualty ratings. Like, here's this battle, and in the first 2 hours, they've lost more men than people did in months of conflict,
Right.
because people aren't playing to keep their army and being not trying to preserve it. And I mean, there's also different versions of rules that have different interpretations, but the main concept of the October War was to have a linked concept so that you're fighting the battle, your casualties were tracked, your experience and achievements were tracked, and you were fighting in a larger campaign context. And, the scope of that project changed. Scope of that project, for better or for worse, it changed into a more diplomatic, bookkeeping, nation building exercise. And
Right.
the players who were engaged in it from the start lost interest. New players became interested, and I lost track of what was going on when I stopped mapping it. Um, but yes, so that's the concept here, that we're actually going to start at Valmy at 1792. We put a lot of thought into how we're going to do it. I've put a lot of thought into how we're going to do it. And we'll have both tactical and operational layers. We'll be trying very hard to control scope creep, because we've seen all too many times
Right.
what happens when we don't. But if we're going to be grotesquely long in allowing it to run from 1792 through to 1815 or later, we're going to control the scope of what we're running in that time. and we'll go campaign by campaign. And whenever we hit a campaign, we'll zoom right in and fight out that campaign and then see what the outcome is.
Right.
And by balance, instead of going day by day forever, by zooming into a campaign and taking the time we need to do that, and zooming into maybe a key battle, a potentially decisive battle, and fighting that one out tactically. And then between that and the next campaign, we have a live session which takes maybe an hour, maybe two. That's a good way to skip over everything. It basically gives us an engine, gives us a dynamic changing world that allows us to fight battles with consequences, which is
Right.
really the purpose of it from a Kriegsspiel standpoint.
So as a command team in that, is that more of a, it's really going to lean toward operational. In other words, setting up your logistics and your force concentration such that those battles are won. And I mean, those battles are asymmetric, right? How are you going to balance that in terms of just philosophically? How are you going to make the battles interesting rather than having a
Well,
10-to-1 battle, you know?
if it's 10 to 1 battle, if it's all going to be very one-sided, that one will just fight out of the operational layer. It'll be a
Got it.
quick exercise. You're doing this, here's the outcome, determine this, on we go. It's when it's I mean, we probably will allow for an asymmetric battle if it's potentially campaign ending, because that's really a situation where the underdog doesn't want to just disengage and move away. They have to fight. And if they can fight and somehow hold out, Antietam, for example, if they can fight and somehow hold out, they can maintain their army in being, then other things may be possible. But if it's just a battle for the sake of battle, we fought three battles between two divisions and then two half corps in the October War, and no, everyone else didn't really have a chance to fight.
Right.
So that doesn't need to be a prolonged engagement. If it's not decisive, we just can handle it operationally.
You know, it's so interesting because when you create that context of the campaign, rather than doing it through some sort of setup in the in a battle's background. When you do the
Mhm.
context of the campaign, those very one-sided fights where you just have to hold on for a little longer make much more sense, and basically the players have more skin in the game.
Absolutely. I mean, there's the sort of battles that we fight commonly in the RKS where both armies are on the field and then they go fight each other. That almost never happened.
Right,
That's a very unrealistic for the campaigns of the period. At the same
right,
time, the Gettysburg style, two armies are blundering together with columns with minimal recon. That also almost never happened. The fact that we know about some examples that are as famous as they are is because they were so rare. Usually there was a lot of scouting and sparring before the battle armies came together.
right.
So
The whole
yeah,
concept of from Clausewitz of accepting battle, right? So each side essentially knew where the other was, and they had to. There was a dance that went on in terms of where to accept battle and where
absolutely.
not, right? Yeah.
Yep. And if they didn't want to fight, unless there was a reason they were compelled to fight, there was no reason they couldn't disengage and march for more preferable ground, which is why you see often weeks or months of maneuvers and light skirmishes and sparring before they either both decide now's the time to fight, or there's political pressure to fight, or one side finds something the other side absolutely has to fight for.
Right.
Uh,
I was
I'm
just
also
reading on the
mindful.
Franco-Prussian War and the French after around the time of Sedan, the commanders didn't want to fight, but they got a message that said the government will fall if you don't fight. So,
Exactly. Then they have to fight.
so they had to, right? They had no choice, or the government was going to fall. It fell anyway, but they were trying to they were taking on an unacceptable ratio of forces in a bad situation just to keep their government intact.
You may be interested to know that in Spine's Franco-Prussian war game, the French are winning.
Oh, really? Look at
We,
that.
as Napoleon III, I'm proud to announce and have announced very publicly in Paris that we are beating the pants off one of the German armies and have the other two slightly isolated, and the Bavarians are now suing to join our side.
Oh, brilliant. There you go. Well, there's an alternative history. We'll all be speaking French by Christmas.
Yes, we,
Oh,
we are still
brilliant.
outnumbered, we are still outnumbered, mind you, but as long as we keep attacking, they don't seem to know that.
Well, I guess if you don't change your mind daily as Napoleon III, it will change history because
Yeah,
there was never a decision that he wouldn't reverse.
exactly.
So back to your Ricewitz project, how many players do you envision and assistant umpires? How do you think that through in terms of its scale as a game?
Well, it's a multi-layer game,
Mhm.
and one of the parts of that is that we are. yeah, trying to control how many are active at any one time. So if we're zooming into a campaign, unless the campaigns are simultaneous, we'll be zooming into one campaign at a time, where the key commanders on that front will be drawn from that faction's players. And there's also a element of a career mode. So let
Yeah.
me outline, let me give you a little bit of an elevator pitch. At the start of things, we have the national government of France as a basically a decision tree, driven
Right.
partially by dice and partially by player actions. The players will pick one of a few different backgrounds, and that will determine. Oh, so actually, I've skipped over a few things. The operational layer is going to be. Have you read Paddy Griffiths? How he handles his operational generalship game?
Not exhaustively, but I have read some of his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, basically, we're cribbing from that in some aspects. So
Okay.
there's because while you're on campaign, there's a lot of what you're doing which is not simply I will fight a battle. Yes, you're also maneuvering various things, but the very action of negotiating your army on campaign is an exercise in itself. So having various commanders with varying renown, which they acquire from doing things well, doing things gloriously. I mean, by capture helping to understand why some of the commanders from the period made the decisions they made, because basically they're building their name, they're building their, yeah, well, I'll say renown again.
Yeah.
That's a capital
Reputation
R.
and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Reputation. Renown is a capital R, both a victory points and a currency.
Okay.
So they earn renown from doing well in battle or taking colors and being involved in a battle where there's a victory or leading a battle as a victory. In our and they can lose it through cowardice and such, but at the same time, maintaining existing army is also something they kind of want to do. But they can also trade in their basically pull strings and trade in their credit for actually I'd like those reinforcements, thank you, or actually I'd like the command to go over here, or I'd like to name my new subordinate, please. I don't want that guy, I don't work well with that guy. I want to name the person I have.
Right.
And so that's sort of a building their renown as they go through various campaigns under the fractious French. Um, it'll be French versus Op 4 at that level. So various if the French are fighting the Prussians, then we'll recruit a Prussian team to oppose them. If the French
Right.
are fighting the Austrians in Italy, we'll find an Austrian team to oppose them.
Huh.
And building that renown until one or more French commanders are in a position to declare an 18 Brumaire, at which point they become the national leader and we unlock the strategic layer. And from there we can have the different powers jockeying each other and driving their own history, really.
So you mentioned this is a multi-year project. What's your philosophy of taking players from, hey, would you like to get involved in this complex game with multiple different approaches around renown, et cetera? And then how do you bring the players along? We've got some of our umpires in our active community will give a big document. Others will just say you just jump in and learn as you go. What's your philosophy in terms of getting the players up to speed?
Well, basically, I'll give them a this is what you need to know. This is the core information. These are the core assumptions. This is
Okay.
what you need to understand about communication and that how I'm handling communication and orders. This is what you need to understand how I'm handling your NPC subordinates and the fact that they have personalities and brains because this is not okay. The number one thing I need to reinforce, and I always reinforce when I run one of these games with the Esprit de Corps system, is this is not a real-time strategy game. You are not the sole brain on the battlefield. You
Right.
don't have to manly command every single unit everywhere. In fact, if you try, you will almost certainly fail. Because if you're sending a message to that battalion and that battalion and that battalion and that battalion, that is four separate messages. And they will all take time to draft, they will all take time to write. That eats time out of your movement. If you tell me that you're riding over there and ordering this unit to charge and writing these three or messages to those three battalions over there
Right.
and also sending a message to that commander over there, that's going to take more time than your turn allows. So that's not all going to happen. Some of it will happen delayed, some of it won't happen at all. You hit the next turn and you've only done some of what you intended, and it gets increasingly disjointed. That doesn't mean I won't let commanders do it because in the period commanders jump the chain command all the time. But it's much smarter if and much more efficient if you're using the commanders you've got, even the ones that aren't players, and saying launch a light attack against that position to fix them. Okay, they will keep doing that within the bounds of their predetermined personalities
Right.
and letting you know how that's going until you tell them to do something different or until circumstances change.
Right.
So you can get all the brains and elements of your army doing roughly what you want them to do. In the
That's
last,
such a
yeah,
great phrase. You're not yours is not the only brain on the battlefield. I think it naturally is learned by players as they play, but it's also something that umpires can keep in mind in terms of structuring scenarios such that many brains is really what the point of the exercise is.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
In the last solo game I ran, which was the 45 player Gettysburg, we had two very player heavy sides, both of which were trying to be run under some similar rules about that were restricting how much you could communicate at any point. That and both sides struggled to get all their or to herd cats in the right direction.
Right.
One side took the very active command role that he was going to ride around and speak to every single commander and see what was going on personally. The other one tried to maintain a central position and tried to get comms flowing there and back. He really tried to do a multi-layer command structure, but
Right.
just found people were struggling to implement the orders he gave them. And Chinese whispers occurred. If he said, make sure you don't engage and pull back, and that went up the line to chain to became an order, became a strong suggestion, became some advice. And then by
Right.
the time that had flowed back, maybe people didn't want to do that, and they started to do it sort of half-hearted, and then immediately got distracted and did something else.
What a terrific lesson in organizational dynamics and leadership just to experience that because that's how life really works.
Yes, indeed. And even though it's been some time, Damon will still get heated if you ask him about it.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned going to the archives in multiple countries. You've walked the ground in Malta through the process of thinking of a game all the way down through, resolving the turns. What is it that really inspires you? What's the most fun for you? Which part of the process?
Oh. It varies. I get a lot of pleasure out of devising, working out what is important for that element, for that particular simulation. So
Uh-huh.
whether it's Gallipoli or Battle of Britain or the invasion or Market Garden or a Napoleonic campaign, it's not just here are the rules I use, I'll make everything fit that, but what are the key elements we need to simulate for this? If it's American Civil War, is it how many people are we killing? If
Hmm.
it's Napoleonic Wars, it's probably not got nothing to do with that. It's probably more about morale and shock and forcing people to fall back and formations. If it's Battle of Britain, it's much more. It's not even about the individual tactics. It's more of a logistical war. There's I enjoy the design side, and one of the
Design
games
side.
I've yeah, I have a First Crusade game in the wings. I have a actually I have a pure logistics, just logistics commander game about the North African campaign, where the
Wow.
allies and the only players are the logistics players for both sides, and they're trying to organize to get enough of the right logistics to the right place to trigger an offensive, and that kind of works because of the simple nature of simple strategic choice, simple tactical choices, sorry, of the operations there, that it
Right.
really is kind of a seesaw. You have strong, you get pushed back to near your supply base, and then it's much easier for you to supply and harder for the opposition to. And you can build up enough critical mass, then a decisive attack can go back the other way. And then it's sort of a struggle to see can you deliver that final blow or do you fall just short? And then the other side builds up again until they're ready to push you back.
Yeah. That'd be neat.
So,
I'll keep an eye on that one. That sounds like um, sounds terrific. What
so I
is
enjoy the
your
design side, and then I also really enjoy seeing players experience it and get excited about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a lot of fun for sure. What's your philosophy on spectators? Do you like to have a lot of spectators in there engage in the spectator channel, or do you more let people just have a look?
If it depends on the game. I don't usually do a lot of live games, just present my present record uh, against that. And there's not usually much to see from that side. But if I'm doing a prolonged play by post, often I'll let spectators in. It's mostly a factor of if I'm worried that they're going to be players later on. So in my the
Right.
Rice thing, I will probably allow people to watch a campaign, but they can't join that campaign. That doesn't mean they won't be able to join future campaigns. I don't object to people having some idea of how I resolve battles, but it will be a different thing.
Right. Okay. So because they're the potential that somebody may join at a different point, you don't want to have any break any fog of war there. That makes sense.
Well, joining at a different point is fine. Just they can't join that campaign
Yeah.
of any.
Right. Right. Right.
If it's a campaign that's 4 months later, all the rough knowledge of how it went is going to be known by everybody at that point anyway. So that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a secret.
Well, you mentioned resolving, when there's if there's a spectrum of resolving conflict in Kriegsspiel, you've got the more mechanical approach. There would be a die roll approach where you kind of build casualties based on die roll. Then there's more of the free Kriegsspiel, which you would basically have an effect that you would be somewhat affected by, or you would apply as an umpire, and then the die would help you shade it a bit. Where do you fall in that spectrum? What's your philosophy of combat resolution?
Um, I don't think any mechanical approach to determining what all the elements of the role are can work.
Hmm.
Like I think pre-roll, there's got to be some insight in working out what the results have to be, what the question actually is. Is it as simple as there are three advantages here? So usually that's the approach I take. There are I have a rough matrix of what advantages and disadvantages are likely to go into the roll, and then I say advantages and disadvantages can include these. And if they are those, and in 90 odd percent, 95% of cases they are just limited to that range, cool, we know how that works. But players are creative. The battlefield is always varied. There can be other advantages, like this side has more elan, that side is wearier, this side has high ground. If I list every single possible thing, I'll be covering pages. And so there's always the option for miscellaneous advantages and disadvantages based on the situation.
Right.
Having done that, once the dice is rolled, I take the philosophy that the outcome has to be derived from that dice roll. Can't let player sympathies or the feeling that someone really deserves that come in. It has to be
Yeah,
the
right.
dice tell stories in themselves, and that's why yeah sometimes the dice tell amazing stories that have no right to happen, and I'll tell you
Right.
more about that after the recording. But
Right.
yeah, just players that have no right to get away with this, who go to get away with certain choices again and again and again, but do.
Sometimes in history that was the case. You'd have a
Indeed.
commander would get lucky basically, or have circumstances fall their way.
I would
What?
rather have lucky generals than good ones.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Exactly right. What part of the whole process is your least favorite? So the thing that, you know, making maps or, you know, long resolutions, what do you try to optimize and spend less time doing, basically?
Boring updates.
Boring update.
Giving people updates where there's either not much to say other than your people are marching along, and that's all there is to it, or worse, having to manufacture incidents.
Yeah.
Um, Back in the 2007, I think, I was running a French and Indian war game,
Hmm.
and we were starting with Braddock's expedition, and unfortunately, it didn't. I leapt into it wholeheartedly without fully considering what was going to happen when people spent the first 12, 14 updates just walking towards each other.
Right. Right.
It was not very exciting.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing is when I don't consider scope creep enough and creative players start manufacturing their own advantages in areas I didn't expect them to. So I'm now very wary of what possible things there could happen if I give people an open-ended brief, and I either don't do that or I'm careful who I give that sort of license to.
Right. I had a World War II game where the Japanese were fighting the Australians, and one side was going to defend very strongly, and the other side was going to carefully maneuver through the jungle. So I had like 9 turns of just people moving through trees. So I know the longest game I've ever umpired. Trying to come up with exciting bird calls and flashes in the sky. So I know of what you speak.
I was aiming to build like a commando series of the small. Allied commando raids along the coast. So sort of having a stealth phase where it's all
Right.
planned out, like a bit like a heist movie, planning out the ops stealth phase of trying to get in towards the objective, and then it all goes hot, and the various garrison forces activate, and they're trying to complete their objectives. And I made a poor choice. Without naming any names, I made a poor choice in the lead Allied planner.
Right.
And then I didn't close the door hard enough on trying to get marksman pistols and trying to get their choice of equipment, arguing with me about moon phases and tides. It just turned into a grind. The game went pretty well when it ran, but
Right.
all the arguments in the planning phase kind of killed the enjoyment for me.
Right. Yeah, right. In trying to track it as
Mm.
I tend to not
Uh,
even track the planning phase. I let people plan because if you go in there and try to follow it, you,
oh no, I
you're
wasn't trying to.
exhausted
It
before
was
the first turn, right?
No, they were trying to get resources from me. So it was a
Right, right,
conversation with me. But I
right,
had to threaten to fire the lead commander several times before he would
right.
just
The
take
planning
take
phase
what I was
as an
giving him.
umpire, where you get pinged 5 times a day on, is this bridge wide enough to fit my wagons, kind of thing.
Oh, that I don't mind. In fact, I'm actually having taking a lot of pleasure in the Regensburg planning phases. I'm
Right.
really happy with how that's running at the moment.
Good.
I actually I opened the planning for game two today, so about 3 or 4 hours before this call. Um,
Okay.
with very long briefings and details, and the army commanders are, they're coming in and they're digesting the multiple pages of briefing they've got both from me and from the advanced guard commanders.
What is your approach to maps? Maps is probably one of our harder kind of one of the harder things we have to contend with as umpires, just getting them together, having them look decent. What is your approach on maps?
How do you mean?
Well, just how do you approach the making of the acquisition of maps? I mean, some people look at it as an artistic endeavor. Other people just kind of pull it from will take and reuse maps from others. Some will just take a map out of the archive and slap it on the TTS. What's your approach and thoughts about
I
your
mean,
maps?
it varies. I'll do the best job I can, but I'm satisfied with historically plausible. Historically plausible
Historically
goes a long
plausible.
way.
Okay.
So if it's a map that has the right salient features, it's good enough. Unless
Okay.
has to be a key map for a key location, in which case I'll find the best map I can. And I did find a very nice map book which had every Napoleonic battle in it.
No, there you go.
Um, but not quite the scale I would like, but is there, and so I can use that and design my own. I'm reasonably good when I have the time with mapping software.
Yep.
And I'm also not afraid to commission. I mean, Wolfton's got another one of my commissions at the moment. He also, I mentioned the First Crusade game earlier, where I've got so when I'm running that, I've got, I already had a map I was ready to use for Asia Minor and the Levant. Wolfton built the map I wanted for Europe, and then that's all the operational layer, and when we have actual battlefield maps, for medieval era, I'm perfectly happy to make my own quite quickly.
Okay. Got it. So I'd envision this question as being talk to yourself as a new umpire, but that'd be yourself at 6 years old. So the only advice you would give yourself as a 6 year old is drink your milk, perhaps. But so if you were to go
Well,
back to a younger version of yourself and with less experience, what advice would you give yourself to improve your umpiring early on?
I would say two things. One, don't assume that all your players have learnt the same lessons about the period that you have or that you want them to have.
Hmm.
Two, don't don't run scenarios that only have one right answer. It's not
Ah,
they're not interesting.
right. Got it.
I mean, for my age six Hastings scenario, the right answer was don't allow your people to run off the hill.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, that's nice. And um, yeah, of
It's
course.
brilliant that you could actually remember your 6 year old Kriegsspiel as the Battle of Hastings and the objective, which just shows that you're a talent that stands above the rest.
Oh, thank you very much.
What could we do as an umpire community? Because this conversation is for the currently we're tracking about 70 active umpires. What could we do as an active umpire group to make actively umpiring easier, better, or what would you suggest we do together?
Well, firstly, I think the stats are wrong. I think there's probably considerably more people doing it because the
Okay.
RKS at this point is the hub of a constellation of communities, not all of whom notice that that there's a desire to track the numbers. I know that there are games being run. I doubt Whisper's noticed. I'm in several games that I haven't seen on the spreadsheet at this point.
Okay.
So I guess find more reasons for people to come back to the RKS, whether it's running it in the server or just, hey, here's something I'm doing, here's something that's cool. This is a good approach. Get people talking about their games. That's something I was trying to do on IWC actually, was just just saying, hey, when we just had that award ceremony in the RKS, people were talking about a lot of games I'm not even vaguely aware of. I mean, I haven't been in
Right.
the recruitment channel to join a game in over a year at this point because I'm just busy with other games. So there's a lot going on we don't know about. Great.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we're doing, what's exciting, what we're playing that's really cool, what's coming up that's cool. Look at it from that standpoint. We'll probably also end up running our own, running a tournament, a Kriegsspiel tournament, just to have different competitions for you to take part in, give you more things to get engaged with. We've talked about, well, I think we talked about this when I was on the staff team at the RKS. We were talking about maybe getting a school of the umpire or school of the player, having sort of some basic shared concepts that to help people get on the same wavelength with not just I want to play it, but
Right.
people who've gone through the same very lightly alcohol lessons, but not talking about heavy education, but just getting people onto the same sort of mindset, like you're doing with the guild actually. And if people are approaching the same sorts of problems from the same sort of standpoints, even if not to the same level as the Prussians with, I expect that, at a
Mhm.
junior or senior level, there's the cult of the offense. So, attack, attack. That's what everyone's expecting, everybody looking for a chance to do.
Right.
If we're expecting, I think one of the major disconnects we face is when we are expecting players and umpires to take something seriously and then they don't. Or
Right.
when we're expecting them to approach it from a light-hearted standpoint, and then people are grim and serious. So if we help people have activities, shared activities, then I think we'll go a long way towards getting people into a common mindset, having more of a sense of community. One thing have you ever played Blood on the Clock Tower?
No.
This is not a random segue. One thing, so you're aware of it roughly?
No. Give us a summary.
Okay, Blood on the Clock Tower is if you I don't know if you know Mafia or Werewolf and that sort of ilk game, but
Mhm.
basically there are a group of players. Some of them are traitors, and the good team is trying to work out who the traitors are. The traitors are trying to kill the good team.
Yeah.
In Blood of the Clock Tower, everyone has a power. There's some reasons that you don't want to just share the information, even apart from just being vulnerable. The evil team have some bluffs that they're provided with to help cover for themselves, and there are storytellers who sort of take the umpire role, who can um, who can help to drive the story and run the story and sort of ha help to administer things when people
Right.
are doing secret things with people are
So it's
using some
it's
of their
called
powers.
so your original one, Blood on the Clock Tower is the name of the game.
Yes.
And then
Yep.
yeah, there's Mafia, there's a spy
Yep.
version, I think. So yeah, the format and there's even
There is.
now a television show, Traders, right, that has this format of
Yep.
you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but apart from the TV show, Blood on the Clock Tower is born out of Mafia. So
Yeah.
Mafia and Werewolf, all the other ones, they're mechanically solvable. Blood on the Clock Tower, as a rule, isn't. You have to get social reads. But the main point I'm reaching for is recently they've started doing. There's different scenarios and different patterns of these roles are in this game, these roles are in that game. And what they've started doing recently is they've been having championships of basically community designed scenarios and
Hmm.
trying them out, seeing what works better, and basically having competitions for scenario design. You see where I'm going here? So if we have all these umpires who are trying to build up both their sense of community and also build what they're working on together, as well as having player tournaments and players playing out similar scenarios to see how they handle that and how they handle the right whatever we determine the right level, the right skills to be. Because I think what I intend to do with the t tournament on the IWC and what I'm arguing everyone else around, because I get passionate about this sort of thing, is not just I'm rambling again, I'm sorry, not just have you won the battle, but also conserving your forces. Because going through different rounds, your casualties will be tracked as well as your successes. And so if you burn out your command to achieve this goal here, you're going to have very, very little to fight with in the next round.
Right. Okay.
But as well as whatever we do with the different player tournaments, I would like to see an umpire tournament or a scenario design tournament where we have people saying, okay, the rep show us your scenario that
Right.
represents these core traits. It could be period, it could be, let's say it's a we ask all the umpires present a scenario that you have designed for the American Civil War era that represents an uncommon battlefield situation, an asymmetric uncommon battlefield situation that's interesting to play out.
Right.
So not just
I love this idea.
40,
So you
not
it's an
40,000 people
umpire
here,
tournament.
40,000 people there fight, but yeah, an umpire tournament. Even if you don't play out all the scenarios, you go through the design and then we have on here or somewhere some shared community discusses the scenarios, not an open community, because I'd like to see the winning two or three scenarios actually get played out by
Right.
teams and have that recorded.
That's a terrific idea. I think it's step one is to pull the upright community together and say this is the community. And I think your observation is a great one, and that is that if we make it interesting to show up
Mhm.
by usually being acknowledged for things you've been doing or have discussion about different techniques, topics, historical pieces. You see this now in the map design, piece design, and scenario design channels. People come in to get opinions and all that. And then create some sense of umpires comparing different approaches. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
That's wonderful. Man. All right. What a terrific conversation, Crisis. Thanks so much for joining from all the way around the world to me, but I'm around the world to you. And we're
yep.
going to keep doing this. And basically, the idea here is that every active umpire in the IKS is a candidate to be interviewed. We're going to get people on and compare techniques, best practices, and of course, we'll have folks like yourself back on to, we'll get panels, we'll do all kinds of things. But the idea is let's just get the conversation going. And you were a tremendous starter of this initiative. Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.